Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
Hello, and thanks for being with us once again here on Capitol Report. I'm David Nicholas. Buena Vista schools are shut down. Pontiac schools run out of money this week. The funding crisis and more this week with my guest, Representative Tim Kelly from Saginaw Township, the Republican now in his first term representing the 94th District. Welcome, Representative. It's good to have you here.
Thanks. It's a pleasure being here.
Let me say first, as we get underway on this Monday, that we did contact the office of your colleague, Representative Stacey Irwin Oaks. Her 95th district specifically includes Buena Vista. Scheduling commitments, though, prevented her from joining us. We did speak with her over the phone for CMU Public Radio news coverage of what's been happening this past week. And the impact on the 400 students, including 25 graduating seniors. Can you, first of all, give us a recap of what has happened so far, and as much as you know, as where we stand as we sit down on this?
Well, first of all,
Monday.
let me say it's an unfortunate situation that's befallen Buena Vista School District, but much of their own doing, I might add. I just came from a meeting with local area superintendents of Saginaw County, and understand that State Superintendent Mike Flanagan is meeting with Dick Cyrick, the ISD Superintendent, this morning at 11. I think from there we'll see what goes on. I think some inklings of what I've heard is summer school might be open to 9 through 12 at Saginaw Township Schools, K-8 at Bridgeport. That is my understanding. So
where does the money for that come from? I mean, would that program, I guess to say, would that program already be in place for students who would need that, and now this would be an expansion of that, because we're talking about all of the students needing to essentially finish up the requirements for the current year?
It's my understanding for those that would need summer school will attend those too. As far as additional funding, I'm not sure. It might just be absorbed within the allocation that's already for those two schools.
Is it being set up, do you know, then to accommodate all outside of the 25 graduating seniors, all of the students, or is there still a review as to whether or not?
David, I can't answer that.
Okay.
I'm not. I think we'll know more this afternoon after this critical meeting in Saginaw.
And as folks sit down with us to view this on a Tuesday evening, that will have already transpired, but we'll be keeping folks posted as well.
Yeah.
Now there is one bill that Representative Irwin Oaks told us about last week that would be coming up for a possible review in your session Tuesday morning, or this morning as our audience joins us, sort of an emergency measure to try to get the schools reopened for the end of the year. Is this symbolic in gesture? I mean, is there any possibility?
You know, I don't know. I have not seen anything. You had mentioned something earlier about Pontiac schools receiving some money this week. That's roughly, they run out of funds by the end of the week, and they're getting some additional emergency funds. And then why not BV? I suppose the only thing I could answer to that, what's the distinguishing would be that one, BV took funds in a deceptive manner, if you will, $400,000 that was supposed to go to helping them run a school that apparently had been shut down for the last 6 months, but they had failed to notify the state of such circumstances. So my guess is just initially it would be good money after bad. That would be the only distinction that I could think of.
You came to Michigan in the 1990s to come on board as a policy advisor to former Governor Engler. These situations sound more like dollars and cents, but if we take a step back to look at the broader picture, I mean, we have a number of districts that have run into, because of population shifts and dramatic declines. The Buena Vista district itself is probably about a third to a quarter of the size that it was. How do lawmakers begin to take a look then at how do we have to look at further issues or questions perhaps of consolidation for financial viability to keep some of these districts afloat, or to look at just dealing with what is a natural shrinkage?
Well, let's just start from the premise that apples and apples, all things being equal, you may run your household budget differently than your neighbor next door, but perhaps you're given roughly the same amount of income, yet you might do a better job of handling your finances than the next door neighbor. I think that's exactly what you've got here. As far as going forward as consolidation efforts and whatnot, I think that remains to be seen. I would suggest that this school not be reconstituted with this leadership, certainly. I think this leadership has failed those students, those families in that district, and need not be compensated to continue.
What about the question of how this came to light at this time? Now, there's periodic audits or reviews, and I'm not familiar with the process, perhaps, and you know, you don't sit on the Board of Education either, but what perspective can you give to us about how often, how frequently audits come up and why it came this late into the school year when we actually got word of what was going on?
David, I'm not sure, and I think that this brings up a lot of questions from a number of different avenues. Is that why does the state not have better controls on local district? Why does the locals have not need to inform the state on a more timely basis? What was going on with the teachers? With regard to, you know, were they aware? I mean, how, obviously teachers were getting paid that weren't in front of a classroom. So where's their fiduciary responsibility? So I think there's a lot of, there's more questions than we have answers right now, and I think that we're just beginning to open up some of these questions.
Natural geography would say that if Buena Vista's doors don't reopen by the fall, that the students would be perhaps taken in by Saginaw City schools. Those schools have seen, obviously, adjustments in population too. You come from the Saginaw County area. If we look then as to where a district would have the means, the resources, buildings that could hold the capacity of more students, of these some 400 or so, what might the prospects be?
Well, I would suggest that any one of these schools, what's the best match, whether it's Bridgeport, Saginaw High, or Saginaw School District, which since we've had declining enrollment, we've lost population in Saginaw County. So my guess is we're more than flush with space to absorb any number of these kids to come in. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's just going to be as a matter of who best do they align with, and what do we need to do to assess the instruction that's gone on. Where are these students in relation to the grade that they hope to be in? So I think that there's still, again, remains to be seen what will and should happen.
Now, the board has resubmitted a financial plan, as has Pontiac. It's being called then the first step towards possible takeover by an emergency financial manager. If that happens in either or both districts, do you know how many districts statewide then would be in that situation?
Well, it would probably fall under, I mean, you get into this emergency manager situation, but for my money, it sounds like they would fall under this new Education Achievement Authority, certainly being on the lowest 5% of achieving school, performing schools. So there again would be a reconstitution of the school. I'm not so sure that that's going to be the answer. Again, consolidation might just be the answer, just to absorb, and that building goes away. That school district, as its independent school district, goes away. Again, I think these questions are ready to be fleshed out over the summer, and certainly the sooner the better, because we've got adults that need to be hired, and adults that need to know where, and children that need to be prepared to where they're going to go.
Does the legislature step in from the standpoint of budgets being finalized and wanting to meet a budget by very early June, getting us to June 30, and then July 1 and the start of the K-12 fiscal year? All of these things now somewhat potentially put a little bit of a bump in the road to the process that you and your colleagues are working on in terms of where's the money go and how is that going to be spent. So realizing, again, this is very early on in a developing story, but how might that impact the budgeting as we get close to finalizing?
Well, as you know, for the last 2 years under the Snyder administration, we've bumped up the timetable of finishing our budgets by June 1 rather than the end of September. So I think we're still on track to do so, to finish out our budgets in another 30 days or so, and this information will go into those finalizing those budgets. So hopefully we'll have numbers to be able to, wherever and whatever happens to those children, we'll be able to have an answer for.
Lost in the midst of this has been the overall budget then, and the ongoing debate over the real sticking point of the road funding. Where do we stand? We can kind of reset now for those that may have lost track of where the progress is towards settling that question as we get into
well, I think it's a good point
session.
You brought up the lost track. 4 months ago when I came into office, I would have suggested that there was consensus on both the need and a number. The need for not only improvements but new road construction, as well as a number, and going along with the governor's suggested $1.2 billion in additional dollars. 5 months in, or now, and here we are in May, I would say that we have consensus on neither. Other than the fact that there are still a majority of us that want to be able to do something. Whether that's and provide some additional dollars. The House passed a budget with an additional $300 million for road funding. We're going to be swapping budgets now, I think, the next couple of weeks. I think we get the Senate's this week, and I don't think that they have no additional road funding suggested in there. So we'll see where that goes. I think that we're kind of stuck at the moment on basically what the governor suggested or from the get-go, which was an increase in registration fees, increase in the gas tax. I think we're stuck there, and I think we're all looking for something out of left field that we can all attach ourselves to and go. I'm someone that wants to see some additional funding and am prepared to attach myself to something that's we're looking for some additional ideas, and I think again we need something to move us off the dime.
Was the consensus more than on the $1.2 billion being the figure? I mean, you say that additional money has been allocated. I don't know what does that get us to? The money that's been allocated at least by the House, plus what may have already been there,
which is already in the budget, which is roughly $1 billion, I believe. So, I mean, it's some additional funds, but it's. I think our roads are in serious poor shape, and I think primarily local roads as opposed to interstate and state highways. So, regardless of, I think another point that I hear an awful lot amongst my colleagues, regardless of how much money we spend, if we additional money, that if people peering out their front door on Main Street don't see an improvement, we're going to be in trouble. I think that the governor's got his ideas of commercial corridors and that sort of thing, and I think that's economic development's important. But again, if people don't see marked improvement in their local roads, I think that we're all going to be in trouble.
If we're in early May and the window gets us to October, November, when some of those projects, sometimes typical weather cycles would be shutting down, how much can it get from the highways on down to the local streets?
I don't know. It's an unfortunate thing. You know, obviously, this was at least the governor's, anticipated us having some idea back in February, late, or early March. And it's unfortunate that we've gone this far, and hopefully we don't miss another construction season. But again, I think we're trying to do what we can. We just, we seem to be stuck in a bit of a rut, and I think need some bit of impetus to move us off the current position.
You say you're open to the suggestions or, as you put it, the things coming in from left field. Mm-hmm. If it's not the increase in the gas tax, if it's not an increase in the vehicle registration fee, if it's not an adjustment in the sales tax at the pump and what that could do not only to road funding but then also impacting the school funding where that money currently goes, what right now does Representative Kelly hear from either your own sense of what might be the good way to go, or what at least most of the voices and so forth in your ear and at your door in District 94, what are folks telling you they're willing to do?
Well, I think at the local level, I think that just looking for, some sort of direction. I, for one, have been, when I have conversations amongst my colleagues and, what could be a new idea, I throw out, just for the sake of, of discussion points, I'd like to see a lowering the rate and broadening the base. Perhaps dropping the sales tax a penny or two, or as far as we can, but spreading it across all things, including services. Now, when you first say that, a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth from a few years back when the Granholm administration went the direction of taxing services, and I think they botched it horribly by picking winners and losers. And I think that it's an idea that needs to be resurrected, but just implemented and thought about in a little broader strokes than what was done in previous.
How would something like that be? We've heard some of these proposals that have started to come out in lieu of what's already been out there. Yeah, but it's going to require the action by the legislature, and then it would have to go to the voters. Is that one that would? I think I'm not. I'm not sure if you lower the sales tax, if that would necessarily have to go to the voter, but obviously to broaden the services that might. So that then kicks it to November, and you brought up the concern, obviously, of missing another construction season.
Again, our budget included an additional $300 million. So if that was indeed the all that we got, I suspect it would be improvement over what from the status quo.
Saginaw County then obviously still has its impact from the Saginaw River, and along the sort of the same lines of putting money into upgrades and improvements, the dredging project. What is the status of some work getting underway regarding Saginaw River out into Saginaw Bay? And if we look at the figure of what you all helped allocate for the governor's proposal, how far down the waterways does that money likely take us to getting?
Well, we did it. We've passed an awful lot of legislation about, again, and it's awaiting in the Senate, is my understanding, but a lot of things to do with additional, emergency dredging funds and that sort of thing. It's a lot of it, from what I've seen, mostly on the west side. But there's always, I think, an annual allocation for the Saginaw River, and that may or may not have been bumped up. But again, low lake levels, not only in Huron and Michigan, have precipitated this need to do this. We need to keep these waterways open, not only for commercial as well as pleasure boating and that sort of thing, and critical to Michigan's economy. So the sooner these things get done, the better.
Looking at the need for sustained funds and budgets for the rivers and then also the roads and the increased need for that, some have looked again more at the issue of the film tax credit or other, I don't know, are there red flags that you see in areas, if we look at the budget overall, where if we really need to address more fully areas A and B, where might we look to adjust the budget?
Well, I think some of us are desirous of looking in the use of the Natural Resources Trust Fund, trying to expand those. One of the prohibitions against it right now is maintenance, and I think, but harbors and dredging and things like that, I think are obviously critical, especially with these historically low levels. Again, is there a way that we can tap that for a limited time use and that sort of thing? You mentioned the film credits. We zeroed out film credits in the House budget. I believe the Senate put in $50 million of credits, movie credits for in their budget. We just
Did you call them up and ask them why?
Well, I think that there's the Senate. I think in particular, Senate Majority Leader is desirous of keeping those film credits. We in the House have, as I said, zeroed it out. Simply don't think it's a good or wise investments. I think that the jobs, while we welcome all filmmaking done in Michigan, I think it's a limited scope of what the abbreviated hiring that they do, the time that they're in here trying to make a movie, and then we simply write a big check to them. They take back to Hollywood. Roads in Hollywood might be fine, but we need the money here.
You are on the House Tax Policy Committee. In mid-April, the House did pass legislation regarding payment of interest on late tax refund payments. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I believe this was a bill by Representative Shirkey, which basically said what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and it was the Department of Treasury would assess fines and penalties on those of us who might be late on paying our Michigan taxes, and we felt the reverse was certainly possible. If we were due a refund, that they shouldn't hesitate about getting our needed funds back to the citizens. So it's both sides. I think it was fair. It was a fairness issue where if you do a refund, that we get it to you as quickly, and if there was interest involved, to pay that.
There's also been continued action on incidents where we've seen people on public assistance receiving lottery winnings. Earlier this spring, you were the sponsor of a bill focused on convicted felons and even the deceased trying to qualify for bridge cards and other assistance programs. Tell us about that initiative and how, at least on the surface, this looks at obviously a clear situation of potential fraud.
Well, again, I think we're trying to do everything we can to rein in costs and look at fraud and abuse. The welfare program, I think, is rife in certain areas for abuse. One with a bridge card. If you remember a couple years back, the college here was CMU, a lot of college-age kids were using bridge cards, and it was determined at that time that these were independent, unemployed adults that, and because of that, required the bridge cards. Well, the legislature in the last couple of years, I think, did away with that. These students are primarily still attached to their parents, so not seen certainly in the view of the legislature as independent, unemployed adults. So that was fixed. This was, again, to rein in whatever, if the incarcerated or the deceased. Now, the department in defense, the Department of Human Services, will say that they were doing this occasionally anyway, or running these matches, but it came to my attention that not even the federal government had asked us to codify this into law as much as 7 years ago. So it was a matter of making sure, regardless of what administration, who was governor, that we got this done. It's Washington has kind of a perverse incentive in these areas, and I can understand it, particularly under Governor Granholm, that this may have been something that might have been overlooked. The more you spend in this area, the more you get back. So not always are we as looking as closely as we should. And the way I looked at it, and again, my colleagues agreed in the House and just passed out of a committee in the Senate, and I was awaiting word on the Senate floor now, is that if we don't rein these costs in, that perhaps we won't have the program there for the truly needy.
Just a few moments left, but I want to return to the water, as it were. The recent heavy rains of earlier this spring, just a few weeks ago, obviously impacted a lot of areas through mid-Michigan, through Saginaw proper, Saginaw County, and now those waters have receded. How much of the assessment is still going on as to the short-term and long-term damage and need to address that?
Well, it's my understanding that the governor announced 19 counties of emergency, and he had to do that so then we could declare an emergency. And primarily in Saginaw County, it fell on the homeowners primarily of James Township, Albee, and while the waters have indeed receded, I think now it's just a matter of getting in and assessing the damage and seeing what we can do as far as the state and federal programs that can kick in low interest loans and that sort of thing to rebuild or repair the damage that was done.
There is always that debate over, and we hear about this along the Mississippi and other rivers where this happens more frequently than even here, about homeowners being required to, or what provisions might be there in terms of flood insurance. If you look at damage from a situation like this, less frequent but obviously very impactful, these low interest loans, do they equal out to if these homeowners were to carry that type of insurance? Does this bring any of that debate back to the surface? David,
I'm not an expert in this area and wouldn't be able to hazard a guess, but it does occur to me, given that these programs, that the idea of the flood insurance to begin with, whether it was on the East Coast, Katrina, I mean, name any one of these large disasters that we have, even a small disaster on a localized areas such as Saginaw County or Michigan in particular, that if the government is going to come in and basically reparations in these sort of things, then what was the point of having the homeowners insure these properties to begin with? I'm confused myself in that regard, but people, again, beyond my pay grade are involved in that, but it's still an interesting question.
Well, we certainly appreciate your willingness, especially to address something as much of a moving target and developing situation as the overshadowing issue of the Buena Vista crisis, and obviously coming in at the juncture you did, giving the perspective that you were able to, and all the issues we were able to address today. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for your time and attention as well here on Capitol Report. Our guest has been Representative Tim Kelly from Saginaw Township in his first term representing the 94th District. Program to be repeated later in our overnight into a Wednesday morning, and of course also posted later to our website, WCMU.org. You can click on the link for TV and the specific link for Capitol Report, where you'll find all the programs in our current season. For all of us and our crew putting the program together, again, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.